Well, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and special kudos for beating the traffic and being here as well. I know that's not really easy at all. But I want to start by just reflecting on what I feel, what I do. And I want to say that every day I feel like a kid in a candy store, because what's exciting about the field we work in is there is so much to learn every single day. And I just want to share with you some of my more recent learnings with something that's on all of our mind with AI and things changing. So I want to spend some time talking about what does that mean to us. And should we be fearful? Should we be overly optimistic? Where should we really be? So I want to start by channeling in the words of Gandhi to begin with. And he said, live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. And especially the second part of this is really what we are here for. We want to be able to learn every single day. And one of the things that I get excited about is you never get old when you have something to learn about. But it's very natural. We are emotional creatures. We have thoughts in our mind. So I want to mention about FDR's words that can help us a great deal. And he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. So it's important, it's okay to be fearful. That's natural. So if you are afraid of things, that simply means that you care about what you do. And then channel that into something positive so you can do something with it. But that also brings up the nature of us as humans. And let's admit, it's really hard for us to accept new things. It's hard for us to change what we do. The more comfortable we get, the harder it is for us to change. That's natural as a human being. But at the same time, it also is important to stay focused and be willing to learn, to be willing to listen, at least to give opportunities for things. And especially with things like AI, I think we can draw a line and you can say that there's somebody to this very end over here who is the eternal optimist, who feels that this is absolutely fabulous. And then there's probably the other end of the spectrum, the eternal pessimist, who doesn't think anything is going to work and nothing is good in this world. But I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. Not everything we see is going to doom us. Not everything we see is going to change everything. But where is this in the middle? And I think we can learn something from Aristotle for this. And he said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And this is something I remind myself a lot oftentimes. I don't have to accept what somebody says, but I can listen. I can entertain the thought. Maybe they're not entirely right, but they're most likely not entirely wrong either. So take the time to entertain those thoughts, let them sink in, then go back, and you have the freedom to evaluate what these things mean to you and how you want to accept it. And that's what I want to focus on today, and for you for the rest of the day. Take the time to let those thoughts sink in and see where it can take you from where you are. But let me ask you the question to begin with. A raise of hand. Who here is fascinated by AI? Okay, about half of us, all right. Who here is fearful of AI? A little bit less, but still. But what about both? A few of us. And who here will not raise your hand no matter what I ask? There's one person, okay, all right. So, cool. So we can again learn from some visionaries. It's fascinating to see that 60, 70 years ago, people have been thinking about this. But some of this is not true, it's fiction. But at some point, the line between fiction and reality tend to disappear, isn't it? And one such thing is a fictional author, Arthur Clarke, and he is known for writing enormously, very popular author of his time. But way back in the 1960s, he wrote something he calls as Clarke's Law. And Clarke's law, the first law, he says, when a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he is almost certainly right. But he goes on to say, when he states that something is impossible, he is very probably wrong. And I want you to keep that in mind. There are going to be old guys like me who is going to tell you repeatedly, don't do it. It's not going to work. I mean, I'll be honest about it. I was here in Trivandrum for a project. I was a young developer sitting next to me, and he said, wait, why don't we do this? He's like, I said, no, it won't work. And he was like very frustrated, right? Looking at me, it's like, but I think it will work. And thank goodness I said, why don't you try it? And he did, and it worked. And I said, I'm so glad you didn't listen to me, right? Absolutely. So don't just assume, especially when they say it's impossible, go home with vengeance, because you can try, it may work. So try it. The second law says the only way of discovering the limits of possible is to venture a little way past into the impossible. Now, I want to remind you of one thing. The worst word in English is the word comfortable. Don't ever get comfortable. That's the doom of everything we do. When you're young, when you're a graduate, you're going through school, when you take your first job, what do you do on your first job? You take all kinds of nonsense thrown at you, don't you? In my very first job, my boss called me and said, you are responsible for all these parsers in the system. You need to learn Yak and do the parsing. And I thought, oh my gosh, they want me to do parsing because I am really good. You don't know much when you're new in the job, right? Later I figured out, when you're a freshman, they give you things not because you're good. They give it to you because nobody else wants to do it. So I became the expert parser, right? Writer in the project. But what is your attitude when you are young? You're like, bring it on. Give it to me, right? Then you start working for a little while, and what do? You find a nice chair, and you sit down. This feels good, right? This is called 2 years of experience. What happens when you work for 5 years? You're like, oh my gosh, this is great. You know what 10 years is? You kind of lay down. At that point, when somebody tells you, what about this? Like, don't bother me. I'm just comfortable right now, right? That is the most terrible position to be in. So if there's one thing I want you to take home today, be absolutely uncomfortable every single day. Stand up and make a fool out of yourself. Do that for 10 days continuously. The first recommendation I have for people is be absolutely shameless. Because when you're shameless, you're open to ask questions. You're asking for help. You're willing to learn. And so, don't be in the middle. Go out to the edge. Explore. Just don't go overboard. Just explore what's the limits, and you'll see that you're pushing that a little bit at a time. And they're so rewarding. If it doesn't work, you learned something. If it worked, you achieved something. In both cases, you come out winning. How cool that is. So it's always a win when you learn or when you succeed or both. So never hesitate to push the boundaries. The third thing he says is, any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's what we are living through right now. How many of us are looking at AI and it's like, oh my gosh, how did it do that? And that's right there in evidence, right? You don't need to see, can you give me an example? Duh, we're living that, right? That's the beauty of where we live today. But I want to ask the question, is AI revolutionary or is it evolutionary? It seems to be changing everything. And what does that mean to us in terms of what the change is? But as it turns out, a lot of people have been thinking about for a long time. Everyone here in this room knows of Alan Turing, right? And Alan Turing asked the question, can machines think? This was the question on his mind in the 1940s, almost 90 years ago. His question was, can machines think? And he wrote this famous, what we all call as the Turing test. So he said a computer could be said to think if a human interrogator could not tell it apart through conversation from a human being. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I saw this person, and I was not sure if he was a machine or a human. No, this is the opposite. We're talking about machines that appear to be humans, not the humans who appear to be machines, right? So, is it possible to not be able to discern whether this is, do you do this? I do this quite often. I'm talking to an automated system, and then I say thank you, right? And you feel like you want to say thank you, right? And sometimes it's you're welcome. I'm like, okay. So, but is it possible to go to the extent, right? Would we reach AGI? Is it even possible? Well, that's a good thought to have, good question to ask. And John McCarthy, back in 1956, coined this term, artificial intelligence. The word that we keep using today was termed back in 1956. And thousands, if not tens of thousands of people ever since, including, if you will, Geoffrey Hinton, who got the Nobel Prize in 2024, have done various contributions to this field. Every one of us, I would say, contributes to it in our own way to it as well. So that brings the question to, is it evolutionary or revolutionary? And I will make the claim that almost every revolution is also an evolution for humans, because it almost always takes decades, if not centuries, for things to gain traction. We often feel like, oh my gosh, look at what just happened. Well, no, that is not just. It feels like it's just happened, but a lot of times it takes a long time. Talking of the word traction, well, it turns out we know what an impact steam engines have had on the human civilization. But when you think about steam engine, it turns out steam engines were not created once and boom, it was done. It turns out that steam engines actually took centuries of evolution and perfection. In fact, steam engines took really about 200 years in development before it changed completely the lives of people around in terms of transporting both goods and people in a very efficient manner. So when we look at things in history, we feel like there was that one moment in time, and the day before and the day after. But it was not a one moment in time. If you look closely, that was stretched over for maybe a few decades, if not a few centuries, when it actually took to happen. And for example, if you think about this, if you were on the roads in 1880, if you were on the roads in 1880, you would have seen and you would be riding the horse-driven carriages. Now, the horse-driven carriages were the method of transportation, about 150 years ago. This is how people traveled through from any cities. If you wanted to go 200, 300 kilometers, imagine what effort it takes to travel in these horse carriages. You know, we talk about pollution of automobiles today. Can you think of for a minute about the pollution of these horses? Raise your hand if you want to be the person in charge of cleaning up behind those horses, right? What a smelly journey it is. And the droppings of the horses had to be cleaned up. Can you imagine the streets and how nasty those streets were? Can you imagine the disease these excretions were causing, in addition to the smell? And imagine you're on a journey and your horse dies on the way. We complain about flat tires, right? What about a flat horse? What do you do about it? So it turns out, if you had a horse back in time, did I forget? You got to feed the horse as well. And the horse keeps eating. So just to feed the horse alone was $200 per year. Is $200 small amount or big amount? It's a big amount. Wait a minute. It's $200 in 1880. So that comes to roughly $8,000 today. If I tell you, I'll sell you a horse, but you got to spend $8,000 to keep it fed, only to feed it. If it dies, if it gets sick, to clean up, all those extra costs. So owning a horse carriage was expensive. And they found out that suddenly there's this technology called automobiles. And the cost of fueling an automobile was $35 per year. I know you're thinking, wow, can I go back to 1880 or 1900, right? When I was a kid, the cost of gasoline was 60 cents a gallon. Now it is, depending on where you are, either $3.50 to $5. I apologize, I don't even know what the gas cost here. I haven't been to a gas station here. But it's expensive, right? But it was $35 to fuel a gasoline-driven automobile. And you would say, my gosh, it's a no-brainer. In a flip of a second, I will drop my horse carriage and buy an automobile, isn't it? Well, as it turned out, the automobiles were not reliable back then. They broke too often. People didn't know how to ride it. And there were so many issues, and people were very suspicious of this newfangled thing called automobile. So as a result, did we even know that actually on the streets for 25 years, that's a long time, isn't it? For 25 years, the roads were actually shared by both the horse-driven carriages and the automobiles. They coexisted. And at the end of the 25 years, the horses started fading away, the cars started becoming more reliable, and we know what happened after that. But that's kind of where we are today. You're waking up asking, is today the day of the AI? Well, has it been 25 years yet since the revolution or evolution has picked up? But that brings up the question. There are some people in this room who are in their 20s. There are some people in the room in 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even 60s. And the question we are asking is, what does this mean to me? What am I going to do? And here's the funny thing, right? Given any period in time, this is not the first time the world is changing. But given any time, any period in time, before the change happens, there were people who lived, either they retire or they die, and it doesn't matter to them. And after the change happens, these people who are born after it, guess what? That's the world they are brought into. Their frame of reference is there. My children were born in a different age than I was born. My children always look at me and say, Dad, I don't understand, they say. I was like, what? What do you mean there was no Google when you were a kid? Right? They always find it fascinating. And how could you have lived with no Google? So they think that God created Google and then humans came after that, right? So it's hard for them to even think about humans existing without Google search being around, or iPhone for that matter. And the point really is, for those people, this doesn't matter. But it's the people stuck in the middle. That's what we have problem with. Because we come with one thinking, and now we have to live in a very different environment. We're like, what does this mean? What should I do? That's the problem. Similarly, think of this 25 years between the time the automobiles were introduced, but the horse carriages were still mode of transportation that people preferred. And I was kind of curious what happened. There were people that were like me, the old guys. And these old guys, they said, forget these automobiles. I don't care about them. I am good at riding horses, and I'm going to continue to ride those horses. And guess what? Fewer people, especially the young ones, wanted to ride horses. They were like, I would rather not pick behind these horses, right? So guess what? There were fewer people interested in riding horses. And you know economics. The supply goes low, the demand goes high. And these old guys, their salary went through the roof. I'm talking to you old guys in the room. This is good news for us, right? We come out. So when you go home today, go home with a smile. And your family is like, you seem happier than ever before. You're like, old guys have a future now. Because our salary is going to go up. Because there are going to be fewer number of people who can do things we do, and we can ride this out. Guess why I'm smiling here, right? Because the next few years, I'm going to just be quite fine. I have nothing to worry about. You say, dude, what about me? I'm this 20-something and 30-something. What should I do? Well, again, these young fellows decided they want to learn this newfangled thing called the automobile. And they were like, their mind was agile, their body was capable, and they sat on it, and they learned to drive these automobiles. And guess what? This is not something people know how to work. Their salaries went through the roof as well. For the people who are young in this room, you got something to smile about as well. That because your job prospect just went up. Only thing is you need to learn this new thing. And guess what? You got the sharpness of your mind to learn. And that's going to be fantastic. So the moral of the story is, this is something to be happy about, right? Because this is positive for everyone. And just need to do things differently and have to keep moving forward. And as it turns out, you've heard this term called best thing since sliced bread, right? That's a very common term, isn't it? You do something and you say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. As it turns out, sliced bread was not something you would be proud about for a good 30 years. And this is the funny part of history again. Humans have been eating bread for 30,000 years. And for 30,000 years, what did they do? They would bake this bread, and they would sit together, and you break the bread. That's why there's a term called breaking bread. So when you sit with your friends and family, you break bread with them. And that's how you use bread. So you buy a bread, and you got to break it. Well, back in 1912, they invented the ability to slice breads. Unfortunately, they lost the prototype and the design when the building burned down. They didn't save it in Git repository, apparently, right? There was no commit. There was no backup. So they had to reinvent the bread slicer. And when they did, imagine this is the 1920s, right? A friend comes home for a meal, and you said, I've got some sliced bread. Would you like to have it? And your friend's face changes color, like sliced bread. Why would I want to have that? Because the word sliced bread was synonymous to tasteless bread. This is the beauty of the world around us. You solve a problem, but you have no clue what problem is going to pop up on the other side. So when they invented bread slicing, you would think this is a great idea. But as it turns out, when you slice the bread, it increases the surface area that is exposed to air. So the bread dried up too quickly. And so when you taste the bread, it felt like sawdust. And people are like, I don't want your sliced bread. Bring a bread that's not sliced. We'll break the bread and enjoy it. So sliced bread was not something you wanted back in time. So the humans suddenly scratched their head. Forget about slicing the bread. How can we keep the bread moist for longer? So they started working on chemistry now, leaving physics alone. And the point is they had to find a way to keep the bread moist, and only then sliced bread really took off. Again, when you see things that don't work, know that eventually you have to find solutions. Nothing just works the day you try. That's something for us to keep in mind. So what is AI today? And I want to say, what can I ask and know if AI was correct, was true, or it was cooking stuff up? I'm like, what can I ask AI to do this? I mean, I could ask, tell me about Manoj, right? Maybe it'll tell me about Manoj. But how do I know it was truthful? I know a little bit about him, but there could be other things I don't know. Then I have to go to Manoj and say, can we sit down and talk about it? Is this true about you? And that's not going to be much fun. So I was like, how do I ask it something? And I realized there is one person I know the most about, which is me. What if I ask AI to tell about me? So I said, hey, what can you tell about Venkat Subramaniam? And I was kind of curious. What is AI going to tell me? And so it blurted out the following. It said, Venkat Subramaniam is an Indian-American academic. I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know about my background. And an author who specializes in intersection of technology and society. Well, I've written several books. Thank you, AI. That does feel good. He has written extensively on topics such as artificial and data privacy and impact of technology on human behavior. And I was staring at this, and I didn't know how to react, because what I found was it is a lie. I never wrote any of those things. But then I realized it's worse than being a liar. It's narcissistic. Can you believe it? It says, you wrote about me. That's what AI says. This is pure evil, isn't it? You go to him and say, what do you know about this guy? He praises me every day, right? It's totally narcissistic. Now imagine, how would you feel using this to solve your problems when you know that's the amount you can rely upon? Now, actually I did this. I asked AI to tell me about one of my good friends. It literally said, without blinking, that he got killed in an auto accident in 2010. I literally stepped out of the room and he was around. I literally went and hugged him. And he gives me a big hug. Thank you, Venkat. I said, I'm so happy to see you. I'm like, I'm happy to see you too. What's happening? I'm so glad to see you alive, right? Because I asked AI, it said you're dead for 10 years now, right? 15 years now. So it can be really scary, right? When you get that kind of response. So AI stands for alternative information. That's what it is, the A and I stand for. So it cooks up stuff. It's an alternative information. And I look at this like, nope, not me. Sounds interesting, but not me. It's an alternate information, right? So AI is alternate information. I was on a United Airline flight. And as I was on the flight, I had to rebook another flight. And I'm like, what do? I need to call them. Well, I cannot call them when I'm on the flight. My phone they wouldn't allow me to use my phone. So I realized, wait, I can connect to Wi-Fi. I can go chat. So I connected to Wi-Fi, went to their website. I started chatting. And the minute I connected, it said, welcome, blah, blah, blah. But notice it says, some answers may be AI generated based on the content from United.com. They may not always be complete or relevant. So check the source link for the most updated information. As soon as I read it, I felt so good. Because what this tells me is, when I write products from now on, I can tell my users, this may or may not work. This may not even function. This may all be bogus. And your bank balance, who knows what it is? Would you write a software like that? Is that your reputation? Is that the reputation of the company that you work for? Would you sign your name on it and say, I worked on this product? So clearly, the standards have suddenly changed. And we seem to be complacent about it. And we are willing to put that out. Would I be willing to put that out on my products? Yeah, you're shaking your head, violently, right? So that is something for us to think about. Is that what we want to do? And remember, we need to be responsible for what we do. As it turns out, the Air Canada website decided to use AI. Hey, wouldn't it be nice? We can get rid of all these people. Put that to AI. Cool, right? So there was one guy who went to book a flight in the next couple of days. And as you know, if you're going to book a flight for tomorrow, it's going to be expensive, right? Rather than booking out a flight for a month or two ahead. And he's like, oh my gosh, this flight is expensive. So he went to Air Canada website and said, hey, I'm booking a flight for the next couple of days. The flight is expensive. And the website said, yeah, if you book a flight that's very close to the departure date, it's going to be expensive. And the guy said, but you got to understand, I'm not going for a trip to have fun. My grandmother passed away. I'm going for her funeral. And the website said, oh, I'm really sorry your grandmother passed away. You see? So is it okay if I go to her funeral and after I come back, can I apply for a refund because it's only for a funeral, right? And the AI said, I'm really sorry about your situation. Yeah, apply for a refund. So he took the trip, went to his grandma's funeral, came back and applied for a refund. And Air Canada said, no way. We cannot refund money for a trip you finished. But he said, your website said it. And they said, we didn't say it, the AI did. Well, the judge did not agree with that kind of argument. So they were awarded the judgment to say, you need to give a refund because your website, right? Remember the word encapsulation. How you implement it is your business. How the application behaves, after all, matters, right? So that is something for us to think about. So essentially, AI stands for arbitrarily inconsistent. So if it is not going to be reliable, it's going to throw garbage at you. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I said throw garbage at you. I apologize for that. Because humans are very good in communication, right? We call this euphemism. Euphemism is where you say a bad thing in a nice way. You don't go to somebody and say, he's a stupid guy, right? That's not a polite word to use. You say he's an interesting guy, right? You're like, ooh. You don't go to your boss and say, boss, I have a problem, right? Bosses don't like you saying you have a problem. Boss, I have a challenge. That feels like, ooh, let's talk about it. And for some reason, interesting people have challenges of all the time. So you don't say, AI did garbage. It's hallucinating, right? It's like, ooh, right? Would you want your kids to hallucinate? What did you learn in school? How is hallucinating, right? We are so happy to put these nice words for stupid things around us. It's hallucinating. It's arbitrarily inconsistent, right? And so that's basically what happened here with Air Canada, and they didn't go well. So, wait a minute. Is this good for anything at all? Should we just go home and shut the computer down? No more AI for us. No, not really. It's important to understand what these things can do for us. And I realize AI is incredibly good in identifying issues with code. I did a few sessions recently. I had about 100 people in front of me. And I give them a problem and I said, code, and I said, what's wrong with this code? I literally have tried this among 1,000 people, 100 apiece. I have had less than 1% of humans, less than 1%, tell me that's wrong in the code. For every single one of that code that humans couldn't find the problem, I feed that into AI and it's spot on. The first problem, boom. Imagine that. You use AI and how many of us deal with legacy code? All of us, right? That's our life. If you're dealing with the code you didn't write, or you're dealing with the code that you don't remember writing, that also counts. You're looking at this code. What does this code do? What's wrong with it? Feed that into AI. It gives you a list of things. That's the difference between the AI and your colleagues, right? You go to Raghunath and say, tell me what's wrong with this code. He's going to first look at this and say, is this person going to take it well? Should I just kind of ease them into it? Give them a little bit maybe? Because he's worried about your emotion, right? But AI doesn't care. AI says, you want it? Here you go. Boom. And it gives you the list of everything that could be wrong in it. And guess what? That's like, thank you. Because I don't want you to polish. I'm asking you what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. It nails it. So this to me is extremely valuable. So if you ask me one area where, hands down, I want to use AI, it's in finding problems with existing code. And there's a lot of that code with a lot of problems. And it works extremely well. For example, in one of the systems I worked on, we had a code similar to this. So I was curious, what does AI say? So I fed that expression, and it nailed the problem. In this particular case, this was decades ago, one of my colleagues ran into this. We were using different versions of compilers on different operating systems, and the program was misbehaving across these machines. And he took the time to figure out what was wrong. And eventually, when he found out, he took beyond Strostrup's book. And in the book, he has a paragraph that says, do not do this. Because the compilers are not guaranteed to process this in a certain way. We got a compiler author here in the room, Manoj, right? Would you agree? There's no consistency in terms of how this would be done, right? So the point is, the documentation says, don't do this. And yet somebody had written code like that. Clearly, we did not pay attention to what we should be doing. In the case of this, we feed this to AI, and it, boom, nails it. It's like, don't do this. So AI is an awesome investigator. And that's what I love about AI. Yeah, it's arbitrarily inconsistent, so don't ask it to do that. Yeah, it is alternate information. Don't ask for information, right? So know what it can do and what it doesn't do. Don't keep poking at it in what it's not good at. But what is it good at? It's an awesome investigator. Leverage that. It works really well. But what about generating code? Should I use this to generate code? So I said, create me a function using functional style to perform this operation of number of occurrence of each number in a list. Hey, that's pretty darn good. It did it. Almost did it. It doesn't write comment every line of code. That just irritates me. But ignore that comment. It's fairly good, right? Could we give a thumbs up for that? Right? Good code, right? But you look at this and say, wow, this is nice, isn't it? But then I said, what is this then? It's an accelerated inference. That's what AI is. It's an accelerated inference. It's extremely fast in inferring things. But what is inference? Inference is not intelligence. Yeah, you got to have some amount of smartness to infer. But if I give you wrong data, and that's the only thing I allow you to be, presented to you, your inference is only going to be as good as the data given to you, right? So in this case, I said, write me a function that tells us the most number of repeated letters in a string. It created this. Don't take too much time reading it. Quickly give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What do you think? I see a thumbs down over there. Thumbs down, right? This doesn't look like I want to really use this, right? If a colleague wrote it, that will be the last time you ever see this colleague, right? You're like, really? This is the code you write? No. Because the minute you look at it, you feel this is wrong. You may even question, is this even correct? Will it even compile? Sometimes we ask the question. So when you look at it, you're like, no, thank you. That's not what I'm going to use. So that's also accelerated inference. So what's happening? What AI is doing is it takes your question and compares it with literally countless number of code it has seen. And with all the code it has seen, it says, oh, for this question, I remember seeing that code somewhere. Ta-da! And this is why, what do IDEs do? They give you the code, and they have a little recycle button on the top. And what do? If you hover over that little button, the text will say, wipe the spit, spit again. Click, you see the next spit. Okay, maybe it's not a spit, it's a vomit, right? Click again. And you keep clicking, and suddenly something intelligent shows up. Or you give up and say, you know what? This is not going anywhere. The worst is, you look at it and say, ooh, that's a solution. Little did you know, that's an interesting solution, right? So the point is, you cannot trust it for what it produces, that accelerated information. Looks complex, is it even correct, is the question. So, if all you wanted was code, you got it. You say, generate code, like done. But is that what you want? Just code. If you care about correctness, conciseness, quality, maintainability, readability, to show to colleague and say, this is the code I want to support, you may or may not get it. It's not going to be consistent. So that is something you need to keep in mind. So you can look at the options. Which one are you going to be more comfortable with is the question. So I was in a non-programmer event. Mostly I spend time with programmers. That's where I live. That's my habitat. Well, I kind of wandered into the world, and suddenly I found myself among the civilians. It was very awkward, right? I'm trying to socialize with people who are not programmers. But as fate may have it, suddenly one person showed up and said, hey, I was talking to this other person over there, and they said you're a programmer. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a programmer. Well, can I ask you a question? He was curious. They said you're a programmer. What do you think of AI? Will it take your job away? This is a nice way to start a conversation to a stranger, right? Or maybe not. And I kind of was a little irritated at this person. I kind of looked at him and it's like, okay, I'm quiet here, not talking to anybody, and the first thing you want to ask is, you're a programmer, are you worried about losing your job? Right? Very welcoming. So I was thinking, what should I tell this person? And sometimes your inner thoughts just burst out suddenly when you don't think about it. And this is what I said to the person. When I ask AI to do something I'm a novice at, I find it awesome. I don't have a clue. Wow, look at what it did. When I ask AI to do something I'm expert at, I find it awful. When I ask her to do things I'm good at, I'm like, really? That's what you did? No, thank you. You know, for years, when I travel around the world, I got friends in different parts of the world, and oftentimes I want to maybe impress them or impress myself. So I want to say something in Norwegian. I want to say something in Polish. So I would write something and translate to Norwegian, translate to Polish, I would send to them. But one lesson I learned in my life is the friends are the most politest people in the world. They always smile, right? So one day I was curious, what if I take this phrase and translate that to my mother tongue? I never had a reason to do it, but I was just curious. I did the translation. I read it and said, heck no. That was the last I used a translator, right? Because that's never, I would talk like that in my mother tongue, and if that's what the translator is doing, poor all my friends who are so kind when I send all that nonsense to them, they're like, it's okay, you don't know any better, right? So the question is, if you don't know much, it doesn't matter what it does. AI is a tool. That's what we need to keep in mind. It's literally a tool. You have to pick what the right tool is for the right job. If you use a wrong tool, that's your problem, not the tool's problem, right? So it's our responsibility to know when to use which tool. So AI is a tool, leverage it, but don't put all your faith into it. So, as the conversations go these days, one of the project managers came to me and said, "Hey, Venkat, I have a thought. I want your opinion about it." And he said, for those with no foundational knowledge, will AI cover their back? That was his question. I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but the beauty is AI is going to cover my back. What do you think? He said. And I was like, how do I reply to this politely? And I realized I don't need to be polite. So I told him how I felt. And I told him, AI is not going to cover your back. It's going to expose your back. That's what it's going to do. AI will expose your back, and that's not going to be fun with your back exposed. So essentially, it may kick somebody's back. If you're not careful or knowledgeable, the effect may not be what you may really like. So AI is not a substitution for saying, I have no clue and look what I did. That's dangerous to be using AI for. So we cannot just delegate this to AI and go home. Tough luck. So I was curious about it. And I said, let me find out what people are talking about, right? And some of them can be really, really fearful. So I said, what about using AI to write code was my question. And the minute I Googled, I saw these responses on Reddit and so many forums. Let's see a few of them. The first one said, using AI-generated code will make you a bad programmer. I'm sorry, it will not. You're a bad programmer already. Let's not kid ourselves, right? AI is not going to make you a bad programmer. You are a bad programmer already. I am a bad programmer already. AI tools are increasing amount of bad code. No, we already have a lot of bad code. The dark side of AI, you can keep going on it. All these fearful things. They just want to scare the heck out of you. But guess what? Let's understand what's going on here. Humans write bad code. Raise your hand if you agree with that. Right? Absolutely, right? I have written bad code. I am very skillful. He doesn't want to let his hand down, right? He's like, I want to continue to keep my hand up because he has felt the pain. I'm with you, brother. Absolutely. Humans write bad code. AI trains on code written by humans. Humans complain that AI is generating bad code. That's called karma, baby. That's what we are feeling. It's all our own consequence. Time for us to feel the pain. Remember all these decades when we could have been writing better code. We didn't want to do it. And now it's showing us back, right? And when you say it's just terrible, yeah, it's like, I agree with you, right? Wonder where they learned this from. So it's karma. That's what we are feeling finally, right? That's just a cycle that repeats and hits us in the back. So that's a reality of where we are. So the problem is not that AI has not been trained enough, that it's been trained without regard to the quality. Nobody went to AI and said, you see that code over there? Example of what you shouldn't do. That little code that you rarely see, that's example of what you'd be writing. But it's just garbage in, garbage out. And AI is like, what do I know? This is what I saw mostly, right? That's what it's going to work with. So what gives? So at least for now, use AI for ideas, not for solutions. Ideas are very valuable. Solutions are scary. Use AI for ideas, not for solutions. Solutions carry a larger burden than ideas. Accountability, reliability, correctness, maintainability, reputation. I invite strange ideas, but not odd solutions. So solution is a tall order for me. Ideas, bring them. That's what helps me to find the different pathways I want to explore and then eventually take one that may make sense. So use AI for ideas, not for solutions, because that can help us a great deal in the long run. But in the long term, what should we do? AI is a black swan. Black swans are events we never, ever, ever thought may happen. But the minute they happen, it changes the world, changes the life around us. There are good black swans. There are terrible black swans. There are even some evil black swans. Good black swans, the Google search that I talked about earlier. Smartphones, would you agree? Communication tools. For you to be able to call grandma in the village and see her, that was not possible decades ago. That's a black swan. There are bad black swan as well, JavaScript. So there are several, right? So the point really is that things you don't know is going to happen, and I'm going to say AI is a black swan. Every single human endeavor has started with failure after failure and missteps. Can you think of anything ever humans have done that worked the first time? Hands down, nothing. Humans never did anything that worked the first time. Why should AI be different? Airplanes fell out of skies in the early days of aviation. With broken heart, we know what's happening even now. With all the things that's happened around the world with respect to accidents but in spite of that, air travel is the safest compared to any other mode of transportation, commercial airlines. But in the beginning days of aviation, not many flights really succeeded. There were a lot of fatal collisions and other consequences. And yet, eventually, we perfected the technology as humans. Decades ago, we had a healthy dose of suspicion about compilers. There was a conference probably 60 years ago. Somebody standing and talking about this thing called compilers, and people are like, nope. It cannot write anything efficient than me writing assembly code and machine code. Raise your hand if you write assembly code in this room. Not a single person did. Usually one person raises their hand, I usually thank them for doing it, so the rest of us don't have to. But the point really is, why? Because compilers are going to be much more efficient than we ever will be. But that was not the case back in time. There are so many articles, if you Google for the birth of compilers, they talk about, where they talk about this new idea called compiler. And this was a PhD dissertation once upon a time, called, hey, we're going to have a way to generate this code from higher level language. And there's stories of the evidence of first compiler being created back in the 40s and 50s, if you will. So if somebody comes to you today and says, don't ever use compilers, I'm going to be writing the bytecode and machine code for you, right? You're like, throw this person out of the room, right? Absolutely. So we did not become more trusting of compilers with time. No, we didn't. Instead, what happened was compilers became more performant and reliable, and they earned our trust over time. And then they improved our productivity. So we are not going to say, give it some time, we'll just fall for it. No, it had to raise up, not for us to fall for it. The question I want to ask you is AI the compiler of the future? What would happen if that's the case? So compilers don't rewrite machine code. They don't rewrite bytecode. That's not what compilers do. What do? They throw away the generated code, and they regenerate one more time. So I would ask the question, what if we discard the entire program and regenerate the entire program like the way we generate bytecode and machine code? I know people in this room, including me, you're like, are you telling me that the code I write will be destroyed and the machine will write code and it'll destroy it as well? Yeah, what if that happens? What's the most important part of an application, I would want you to think? I would say it's the data. Data is what business cares about, with all respect. That's what is the most impactful for the business. Plus the requirements. What if we can take the data and the requirements, generate the application, like we generate the bytecode? And you say, whoa, wait a minute. My requirement just changed right now. Well, when your requirement changed, delete the entire application. Regenerate your application. What's going to happen then? So if I asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses, said Henry Ford. I want to emphasize one thing before I go. I am not saying programmers are horses. I'm a programmer. I am not a horse. I know it. So that's not my point. But I'm saying people want faster horses. But what we really need is not faster programmers. I call it nonsense when people say increase programmer productivity. I don't care, with all respect. I don't want more productivity of my programmers. What I really want is greater business agility. That's what I am after. My business should care about business agility, not about programming productivity. If AI can forget about making programmers productive, instead it can make the businesses agile, that's when AI is useful for me, not otherwise. I don't want faster horses. I want to get to where I want to get more efficiently and faster and safer. AI is a black swan. The question we want to ask is, who moved my cheese? Because we are living yet again this moment of who moved my cheese. This is a silly book by Spencer Johnson. He talks about 4 characters in the book. 2 are mice-like characters, 2 are human-like characters. There's the hem and the ha. And every day when I wake up, I have to ask the question, do I want to be the hem or do I want to be the ha? That's a decision we have to make. Do you feel like you're entitled? I took all this time to learn and get good. I don't want to do anything more. Who moved my cheese? I demand my cheese here because I deserve it. Or do you want to be that one that seeks where the next cheese station is? That's a choice each and every one of us have to make. Do you want to ride or do you want to be swept under? That's a choice you have to make every single day. Darwin is often misquoted as the fittest survives. No, not really. The dinosaurs did not make it. Sadly, the dinosaurs in our field will not make it. That's the reality. But according to Darwin's Origin of Species, it is not the most intellectual of the species that survives, not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that's able to best adapt and adjust to the challenging environment in which it finds itself. He chose the words very carefully. Let's underline that word. In the environment in which it finds itself. You didn't ask for this. You didn't say, I want this. You have woken up your eyes and you find in the environment around you. It's not a choice that was given to you. But you have no choice. You have to find a way out of it. I cannot tell you, if only you've been wise, you wouldn't be here. No. This is the situation every one of us have been put into. Environment in which we find ourselves. So we have to adapt if we want to survive. So ask not where AI will take us. Wrong question. Instead, ask where you want to take AI. Because that means you are in control. You get on the driver's seat and decide where you want to go, not where it's going to take you. So that's a call for action. You have to take charge of it. If your job is mostly typing code, that part of the job will eventually disappear. But if you're mostly focused on problem solving, decision making, inferring context, leveraging proper tools to accomplish those, then delivering results will further be very enriching moving forward. So my recommendation is skill up, don't fear down. Because this is your moment to take control, to decide where you want your destiny to be. So let me emphasize, skill up, don't fear down. That's a call for action. Hope that was useful. Thank you.